The orphan struggle. In the heart of Ikena village, surrounded by thick forests and endless whispers of the wind, lived Obina, a 17-year-old orphan. His life had been one of endless struggle. His parents had died when he was just a child. His father, a skilled hunter, taken by a mysterious illness, and his mother, a kind woman, lost to the same cruel fate soon after. Left alone in a world that gave him no mercy, Obina became his own provider, his own protector, and his own teacher. With no one to depend on, he took up his father's old bow and arrows and learned to hunt. The forest became his home, his ally, and sometimes his enemy. Each morning, before the sun painted the sky with gold, he would step into the wilderness, searching for animals to sell or eat. Despite his hardship, Obina refused to give up on his dreams. He wanted an education, to become something more than just a hunter. Every coin he earned from selling bushmeat, he saved for school fees. He attended classes in the village school, wearing the same worn-out clothes, facing ridicule from those who lived in comfort. "Look at the bush boy," they would mock. "Smells like the forest, eats like a wild animal." But Obina swallowed the insults like bitter medicine. He had no time for pride. He only had time for survival. One evening, after selling a few rabbits in the village market, an old woman grabbed his hand. Her eyes were milky white, as if she could see things beyond this world. You are walking toward darkness," she whispered. "The spirits, they watch you. Blood will stain your hands." Obina pulled away, his heart pounding. He had no time for the ramblings of an old woman. But as he walked home, her words clung to him like a shadow. Days passed, and the forest remained his second home. But then came the hunt that sealed his fate. It was a quiet afternoon. The sun was setting, casting an orange glow over the thick trees. Obina had been following the tracks of a large antelope, careful with each step. His stomach growled. He hadn't eaten all day. Suddenly, a rustle in the bushes. His sharp instincts took over. He drew his bow, steadying his breath. He had done this 100 times before. Then, a shadow moved. Without thinking, he released the arrow. It whistled through the air, piercing its target with deadly precision. A sharp cry of pain echoed through the forest. But something was wrong. That was not the cry of an animal. Heart pounding, Obina rushed forward, and what he saw froze his soul. Lying on the forest floor, an arrow buried in her chest, was Princess Adora, the only daughter of King Obis. Her white royal garment was stained with red. Her lips trembled as she tried to speak, her eyes filled with shock and pain. "And no, I was just picking flowers," she gasped. Obina dropped his bow, his mind spinning. The princess? Here? He had never seen her up close before, only from afar during village festivals. She was beloved, the pride of the kingdom. And now, she was dying by his hands. The curse awakens. As Obina knelt beside her, the wind howled through the trees, as if the forest itself was mourning. A deep, chilling whisper filled his ears. "Blood spilled unjustly shall call forth the wrath of the spirits." His body shook violently. He felt a strange coldness creeping through his veins, like unseen hands gripping his soul. Then, the princess took her last breath. At that moment, a sudden gust of wind blew through the trees, and a shadowy figure appeared among the branches. "You have committed the greatest sin," a deep voice growled. "The blood of the innocent stains your soul. Your suffering has just begun." Obina gasped, but the figure vanished as quickly as it appeared. He barely had time to process what had happened when shouts echoed from the distance. The king's guards, they had heard the princess's scream. Obina's survival instincts kicked in. He ran. The hunt for Obina. By the time the guards reached the scene, Obina was deep in the forest, his heart racing, his breath ragged. News of the princess's death spread like wildfire. The king was inconsolable, and his rage shook the entire village. "Find the murderer," he roared. "Whoever did this will die a death worse than the worst punishment." The entire kingdom turned against Obina overnight. His face was described to everyone, his home set on fire. People who once ignored him now called him a demon, a murderer, a cursed soul. But the real nightmare had only just begun. The curse takes hold. As Obina hid in the darkest parts of the forest, strange things began to happen. He could hear whispers in the wind, haunting voices calling his name. Shadows moved around him at night, even when no one was there. His reflection in the river twisted into something unnatural, a face that was no longer his. Animals fled from him, sensing something dark within him. The spirits of the forest had marked him. But worst of all, Princess Adaora's voice began to haunt his dreams. Obina, why did you do this to me? You must pay for what you've done. He would wake up gasping for air, his hands trembling. He tried to convince himself it was just guilt, just his mind playing tricks on him. But deep down, he knew the truth. Something far worse than the king's wrath was hunting him now. Nowhere to run. As days passed, Obina grew weaker. The curse tightened around him, making his body frail, his mind unstable. He tried to leave the forest, but every path led him back. It was as if the trees themselves refused to let him go. And then, one fateful night, as he sat by a dying fire, shivering, he heard it, the sound of footsteps. Not human, not animal, something else, something that had finally come for him. Obina's legs burned as he ran through the dense forest, his breath ragged and uneven. The cries of the king's warriors echoed behind him, their torches flickering like angry fireflies in the night. He dared not look back. He had seen what they did to criminals, public beatings, executions at the town square, bodies left to rot as a warning to others. But he was no common criminal. He was the cursed one, the one who had taken the king's only daughter. The branches tore at his skin like unseen hands, drawing thin lines of blood along his arms and face. His vision blurred from exhaustion, but he pressed on, deeper into the unknown. The forest was his home, yet tonight it felt foreign, as if it too had turned against him. A sudden rustling in the bushes made him freeze. He crouched low, his breath shallow. The warriors were close. He could hear the heavy steps, the sound of weapons clinking against armor. He couldn't have gone far, one of them growled. The king wants him alive, for now. Obina's heart pounded. Alive, for now. That meant suffering. That meant torture before death. He clenched his fists, pressing his body against the damp earth. He had to keep moving. The forest stretched endlessly, and with each passing second, it seemed to shift, as if guiding him somewhere, or trapping him. A whisper brushed against his ear, though no one was there. Murderer. He snapped his head around. The trees stood silent. The night was watching. Then the chase resumed. The whispering shadows, as Obina fled deeper into the cursed heart of the forest. The night itself seemed to close in around him. The torches of the warriors faded behind the thick fog that had suddenly crept in, and soon, he could see nothing but eerie shapes dancing in the mist. Then he heard it again. The whisper. Obina. His blood ran cold. It was her voice. The princess. He turned in a panic, searching the shadows, but all he found was emptiness. Yet the air was thick with something unseen, something pressing against his chest, making it hard to breathe. Then the fog shifted. Shapes emerged. At first, they were nothing but silhouettes. But as he strained his eyes, they took form. The villagers, the warriors, the king himself, all standing in the mist, their eyes hollow, their mouths moving in silent curses. Murderer, you killed her. You will never escape. Obina stumbled backward, his heart hammering. His mind was unraveling, the lines between reality and nightmare breaking apart. No, he whispered. It was an accident. But the whispers did not stop. They grew louder, swirling around him like a storm. Then, a hand grabbed his shoulder. Obina screamed, spinning around to fight, but there was no one there. Only the cursed wind, whispering his name. He ran. Hours passed, or maybe minutes. Time had lost meaning. His body was failing him, but he kept going, his bare feet torn from the forest floor. Then, through the trees, he saw it, a river. The moon cast its pale glow upon the water, turning it into a silver path through the nightmare. He stumbled forward, desperate for relief, for a moment of silence. He knelt by the river, cupping the cool water in his trembling hands. He lifted it to his lips. Then he saw it, his reflection, but it was not his. The boy in the water was not Obina. His eyes were hollow sockets, his skin was pale and lifeless. And behind him, Princess Adora. She stood just over his shoulder, her white dress stained red, her dark eyes locked onto his. Obina fell back with a gasp, scrambling away from the river. His pulse thundered in his ears as the water rippled, distorting the twisted image. You cannot run from me, the princess whispered. Obina clutched his head. Leave me alone. But she did not. She never would. Obina's breath came in short gasps as he staggered backward from the river's edge. his reflection still twisted and unnatural in the water. The ghost of Princess Adora stood behind him, her pale face emotionless, her dark eyes locked onto his soul. "You cannot run from me." Her voice was barely above a whisper, yet it shook the entire forest. The trees groaned as if alive, the branches twisting and curling like skeletal hands reaching for him. Obina clutched his head, shaking violently. "I didn't mean to, but you did." The words echoed from every direction. Then, the ground beneath him trembled. A cold wind howled through the trees, sending leaves spiraling into the air. The whispers of the dead grew louder, forming a chorus of sorrow and rage. Then, something grabbed his ankle. Obina screamed, trying to pull away, but a dark, shadowy hand had emerged from the earth, its fingers cold as death. More hands followed, clawing their way out of the soil, grasping at his legs, his arms, his throat. "Murderer, you cannot escape fate." The voices grew into a deafening roar as the hands dragged him down, pulling him into the very earth itself. Then, a sharp horn blasted through the night. The curse paused. The hands recoiled. The king's warriors had found him. Obina barely had time to react before torches surrounded him, their flames burning through the mist. Spears pointed at his chest. The warriors had him cornered. "He is the one of them shouted. Obina raised his hands, his heart pounding. "Please listen. I—" A spear struck his leg. Pain exploded through his body as he collapsed to the ground. He clutched his bleeding wound, gasping. Then, the warriors parted. King Obi stepped forward. The king's eyes were red with grief, his face twisted with sorrow and fury. He stared down at Obina, the boy who had taken his daughter. "You took the only thing I had left," the king said, his voice heavy with pain. Obina swallowed hard. "I swear it was an accident." "Silence," the king roared. The air itself shook with the force of his anger. The warriors tightened their grip on their weapons. The king lifted his staff, its golden tip glowing under the moonlight. "By the laws of the gods, you shall suffer as I have suffered." Obina's chest tightened. The curse wasn't done with him yet. They dragged him back to the kingdom, his hands and feet bound in chains. The villagers had gathered in the palace square, their faces a mix of rage and pity. Some cursed his name. Others looked away, unable to meet his eyes. But all were waiting for his judgment. The king stood before the sacred flame of justice, a fire that never died. He turned to the high priest, an ancient man with hollowed eyes and bones around his neck. "Let the spirits decide," the priest declared. The villagers gasped. Even the warriors looked uneasy. The trial of the spirits was a fate worse than death. Obina was dragged to the altar, where the priest drew symbols on his forehead with red dust. Then, the priest lifted a bowl of black water and began to chant. The wind died. The fire flickered. Then, the shadows moved. Obina felt a cold grip on his heart. His body went rigid as a dark mist rose from the ground, twisting into an unnatural shape. It had no face, yet it spoke without words. "Guilty," the crowd gasped. The warriors stepped back. Even the king clenched his fists. Obina trembled. "Please, I didn't mean to." The mist wrapped around his body, lifting him off the ground. His breath hitched as icy tendrils coiled around his throat, his arms, his legs. The curse had claimed him completely. Obina floated above the altar, the dark mist squeezing tighter. The villagers watched in horror, some covering their faces. The king turned away, unable to watch. Then, the ghost of Princess Adora appeared. The entire crowd froze. The warriors dropped their spears in shock. She stood in the center of the mist, her white dress still stained with blood, her eyes unreadable. The mist shrank away from her. She raised a single hand, and the curse stopped. Obina collapsed to the ground, gasping for breath. Adora turned to her father, her voice soft but unshaken. "Let him go." The king's face hardened. "Daughter, he took you from me. And yet, I still stand," she whispered, "because his suffering is already greater than death." The king hesitated. His hands shook. Obina stared at the ground, too weak to move. He had nothing left. No family. No future. Adora looked at him one last time. Then, with a single whisper, she vanished. The crowd stood in silence. The curse was broken, but Obina was already lost. Epilogue: The Lost Hunter. The king did not order Obina's execution. He did not order him to be freed, either. Instead, The warriors led him to the edge of the forest and left him there, alone. No one spoke his name again. No one dared to seek him. Some say he wandered the cursed lands, his soul forever trapped between life and death.